Welcome to the Choose on Purpose podcast, where we live with intention. This podcast is here to help fuel your fire, empower your journey, and celebrate the fierce determination of multi-passionate entrepreneurs, CEOs, and founders who are courageously making their mark on the world, much like you and I. And I'm joined by a co-creator, I'll call her, of this episode, Mandy McGowan, that's joining us today. I'm your host, Becky Ploutz. I'm a seasoned. Mandy and I were just talking about how she didn't want to say the year, how many years necessarily she's been in business, but I'll just call myself a seasoned empowerment portrait photographer with over a decade of experience. So I just kind of leave it at that, Mandy, as like as a little teaser versus the exact year. But we're going to own our wisdom. We're going to own our wisdom because we earned each one of those years that we are learning in the process of our journey. So
welcome. Boy, did we.
Yeah, welcome, Mandy. It's so great to have you on the show. Go ahead and introduce yourself, share a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Becky. So my name's Mandy McGowan. I'm based out of the Denver, Colorado area. I am the owner and founder of Elevating Profits, LLC. So I love that you said multi-passionate entrepreneurs, because I am definitely multi-passionate in the way that I help other business owners. My background is in finance and accounting. And so I work with business owners to ensure that they understand the financial side of their business, that they're being very intentional about that, whether that is from looking at, are we making enough money, or looking at, do we need to save money, which brings in some of the other passions that I have around that side of being able to help entrepreneurs save money and invest money for their retirement, and just looking at all of those aspects.
Sounds like super sexy work.
Yeah, so sexy. And I've been doing it for 16 years almost. We're just shy of 16 years.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, it is such a great conversation to be able to know like the impact that you're making, helping other businesses thrive in how they're really paying attention to their financials and the things that, really support them in moving forward. I think that and I love that your name is elevating profits. I mean, that just automatically tells us exactly what you're going to help us do. Let's go.
Yep. I tried to get away from it for a little bit and I came right back to it. I'm like, it's just perfect. Like, it's so clear.
Yeah. Clarity is king, or queen. We'll call her queen. So I love it. And I'm super excited. So I wanted to also share on the podcast that Mandy and I met on a cruise. So I didn't actually know you at all before we were on the Polka Dot cruise. And so I think we met in like a hot tub or a pool or something.
I think it was a pool. Yeah. And then we had dinner together and then we just kind of hung out for the rest of the week.
Yeah. So I love the opportunities, and we've been in person a couple times for fun events that we get to gather for. So I love getting to have conversations with you, Mandy, and I'm really excited that you're here to just kind of shed some more light around the things that you're choosing in your life, right? Because the name of Choose on Purpose podcast is really about diving into our heart stories and how we're willing to shift with fear and walk through something that is challenging, or that we can really look at the lessons that we're learning and embrace them along the way. So what is maybe I love car analogies. So let's think about like exploring a detour. When on your journey, maybe for the 16 years, right? Where was the detour? Because you said you tried to get away from the name even. So tell us about the detour a little bit.
Oh, this is so funny because you said with fear and my whole body got like goosebumps. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I relate to that so much.
All right, dish.
Just one detour? Like there have been a lot over 16 years. I feel like as entrepreneurs, we have detours all the time. Some people call them pivots. Mine have definitely been detours. I'll start with kind of the first one, and then I'll share some recent ones that lead into the name of trying to get away from it. Okay. So when I started my business, I was doing accounting work, helping people with tax resolution. So they owed the IRS. And over the course, as I developed as an entrepreneur, I started to realize that like it changed the way I wanted to show up in my business. And so I kept like evolving and shifting and I don't know if anybody else suffers from this, but I'm like, I get an idea and I'm like, let's go, let's run with it. Let's make it happen. And then maybe like a couple months into it, I'm like, maybe I should have thought that out just a little bit longer to be able to see some of these things coming down the pipeline. Um, One of those situations was I had a business doing really, really well. I was pushing almost 750,000 annual revenue. I decided that it was time to take me out of the day to day. And so I hired a pretty large staff in a very short time. So I went from about 7 employees to 32 employees over the course of about 5 months. Took myself out of the day today very unsuccessfully. So by the time I had the 32 employees, we were tracking for $1 million a year. And after a few months of taking myself out of the day to day, like I kept being like getting ready to run payroll. And I'm like, why is there no money here? What's going on? Why do I feel broke? Stopped paying myself for 10 months, like tried to just keep things afloat, taking basically the equivalent of legal loan shark debt on to be able to cover payroll. And one day I walked into the grocery store. So I'm a mom of 2 kids. One day I walked into the grocery store. Now, mind you, I was delivering pizzas on the side at this point, really hoping and praying every time I went to go deliver pizzas that nobody I knew ordered a pizza that I had to deliver, because how embarrassing would that have been? But I walked into the grocery store. I was going through divorce at the same time and walked into the grocery store needing to get about $18 worth of groceries, knowing that if the check I had written the electric company a few days earlier had already cleared the bank account, I didn't have $18 in my account, and I didn't have any money in the business to cover the groceries. And so I remember going in and grabbing just like the cheapest of cheap things and like trying to like praying, like literally standing in line, hands clasped, praying at the cash register that I had $18 in my bank account, that my debit card swipe was going to clear. And it did. And that led me out to my car, where I cried in the back seat for probably at least a good hour before going home. And then that was probably my first detour that I intentionally took. I walked into the office the next day and I was like, that was my rock bottom. This is enough. I'm done. What am I changing? This is not okay anymore. Within 48 hours, I fired all but 2 of my employees. And I basically was taking on the work of the work I was doing and that I still had on my table was the work of equivalent of about 6 or 7 people. But I knew that I had to get back in the trenches and I had to fix the business. And so that was probably my first like intentional detour. And so over the course of 18 months, I improved it by 183%. Like, it's all good. I still stand to say I'm a business owner and I lived through it.
Yeah.
But what ended up happening was I fixed that business so intentionally, and I say with air quotes, because it wasn't broken. I just needed to adjust things. But I got that business back on track so intentionally that actually 1.5 years later, I had somebody offer to buy that business for more than I ever thought I would be able to sell it for. So sold that business, and here I am sitting with a non-compete for certain services I had done in that business, but not everything, and being like, well, where do I go from here? And I was like, okay, well, I'll just continue to do tax, accounting, and bookkeeping. So I did that. And so I built that business up, again, very intentionally, kept my staff small. I had a lot of fear around employees after everything that had happened in my previous business. So kept this one a little smaller, but still big enough that it was attractive. Had somebody approach me after a few years and offer to buy that business. And so I sold that one. And then I'm sitting here and I'm like, well, now I have a non-compete for pretty much everything I've done that's still in existence. Like, what do I do now? And so that's really where I took my story of my business almost bankrupting me, not being able to cover payroll. And I was like, you know what? If I can do that to myself working in the accounting industry, I can only imagine how many other businesses out there could be facing a similar situation. Maybe not at that scale, but could be facing a situation where they're like, WTF, I don't even know what to do when it comes to my finances.
Right.
And so that was another detour where I went into financial coaching. And so I walked in that space for a couple of years, and then multi-passionate entrepreneur, I realized very quickly, I can't do just one thing. I'm like, the reason I was so good and able to stay focused with my tax business was it was always different. Every
Mm.
return was different. Every client situation was different. Those random calls of like, I just got a $300,000 inheritance and now we need to figure out some tax planning. I'm like, it was always keeping me on my toes and it was always different. When I went into the financial coaching space, there was some differences day to day, but for the most part, it was pretty similar what I was working with my clients on. And to me, that got a little boring. So hence my next detour. I've now realized that I have to do multiple things in order to stay engaged. So now I'm in a space where I work with bigger businesses as their fractional CFO. I work with smaller businesses as a finance coach. I do life insurance investing. I have a health insurance option for my clients that allows them to save money. So I'm like kind of in all these spaces, but it all really is around that financial piece. So yeah, so that's like my detours in a nutshell.
I love it. I, I mean, right, to someone that isn't multi-passionate or that has been told like it's a terrible thing for you to have all of these opportunities for, all of your facets that you have experience in, right? People that don't understand that would think you're crazy and like that's just so irresponsible or whatever. But as multi-passionate people like that are listening to this, like we get it. Like it all, there is a thread that makes sense in all of those things. It is on purpose. It is intentionally built inside your structure. And I love that, having the conversations with people like you to be able to know like it's who I am. And having that awareness is so powerful to know that you can put the blame and shame kind of stuff on the back burner and really just run your own life,
Yeah.
and how it's going to work for you. And I mean, that's also, I wrote in my note to myself that you're just talking about taking inspired action. We were like, oh, I had this idea and like I start doing this. And to me, that's inspired action. And I believe that so many times I'm coaching with people that are a lot of overthinking. And when we're multi-passionate like we are, it's like we think about it and then we just start doing it. And sometimes it seems flighty or whatever people think, but it is about that inspired action. And I think that there's something really beautiful about the people that can do that, because then we're also inspiring the people that don't necessarily have that as their like go-to. And I thought about how it's a variety of life, right? Like you saying like the things get kind of boring, and I can definitely relate to that, when it, especially if it was like the more one-on-one stuff, it can get kind of, slow going. And I love group work. So I don't know if you do like any of the things that you do is group work, but
Some of it is, not a lot.
okay. So I found that I really love in like the group stuff and community stuff because I mean it's always different. It's always going to be a different topic and a different kind of discussion. So I love that the spice of life and having that variety that you mentioned, keeps it just fresh and fun in a way that you still know the way that you're doing business. There's still similarities, but it's a new day and there's a new opportunity to support people in a different way.
Yeah, and I love that you call it inspired action. I think that's a much better term. Like, I don't even know what I'd call it, but inspired action was not on my radar. But I think for those of us that are multi-passionate and we are taking that inspired action, if you're anything like me, I'm like, I can see the end goal. I
Mm.
don't always see the steps to get there. And until I take that first step, I don't know what the next step is or the next step is. And sometimes that third or fourth step on the ladder is like, oh, I need to jump over to this ladder to actually make what I want it to be happen. But it's like I either take inspired action or I get stuck in analysis paralysis. So to me, I'm like inspired action all day.
Yeah. Well, and I love calling it inspired action because to me that means that it's in alignment, right? If it was that you were going to do basket weaving all of a sudden, that wouldn't seem like an alignment. Like how is this relating to being in financial world, And when you're leaping to a whole different, building versus the
Oh yeah,
ladder.
I did that jump once too and then figured out really quick. I'm like, this is not working.
Who is that? Yeah. And the other part of it too, like we're talking about detours, but um some of those that you talked about, I thought about rest stops, like those intentional pauses are the rest stops. okay, great. I need to pull over. I need to have this time. I need to collect myself, XYZ. So would you describe any of those for yourself as an actual rest stop?
Yeah, when you put it that way, I would say both times I sold my business were probably rest stops for me because it was really it's like I just thought about like, yeah, pull over at the rest stop, check your GPS, make sure you're still where you're headed, like go to the bathroom, get the snacks, refuel, figure out the next steps. So I would say both of those were definitely more rest stops than detours. And I would say really like when you put it that way, probably just like the first one was the detour and everything else has kind of been a rest stop along the way of like really just figuring out that bigger piece of like how am I meant to serve the business community out there? How am I meant to serve my community, the world, the people that I will come in contact with? How do I impact them? And what does that look like?
Oh, so good. I love that, right? Adding that layer in there. You're like, okay, actually, let's be real, right? Because now you can own that part of your story. Because now we can really see, like, okay, great. That part was unplanned. But the rest stops, those have to be more planned. They're more organized. Like I love that you brought up GPS. To me, following my own internal GPS is all about your gut, your purpose, and your soul, and being able to just really have that checkpoint to say, okay, where am I pointing to? So I love that you brought up checking the GPS and the snacks and all the things. It's so relatable.
Yeah.
It's so
I'm like, I really
relatable.
like that analogy. It's not that I took all those detours. I had one detour that kind of, and really like, I'm grateful for that detour because
Yeah.
had that not happened, I hate to say it, but I was making such good money in the work I was doing at that
Mm,
point that I probably would have ended up stuck there somehow
right.
and not really fulfilling what actually makes me happy and is really, really helpful to the people I serve.
Yeah, and that's key. I think the helpful part of it is that you've created something that's sustainable for you first, right? Because if we're only in it for the money, it's not sustainable because the
Yeah.
money is not the happy part of it. It is the clients that you're working, it is how you're impacting them that is sustainable, right? And that you learned along the way. I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, so let's think about a green light moment. Let's think about a green light moment. Like this has helped shape the leader that you are today. And I know that you're in some new leadership positions and roles, but like as someone that builds community, like how would you describe like a green light moment in your life?
Oh, geez. You said that. And I'm like, I feel like I have green light moments all the time if you really stop and
Yeah.
think. Like, I feel like anytime I do something that then I have like an affirmation where like somebody's like, oh my gosh, that helped me. Or like, I'm like, oh my gosh, that felt easy and it was impactful. I'm like, look at all of those as
Mm,
green light moments. Um, yeah, I don't know that I could nail down one on that. I would say, well, kind of like you said, I recently stepped into a new leadership role, and there was definitely some like yellow light, red light, and then like a big green light. Like it was one of those. And I'm like, well, maybe, no, definitely not. Maybe, no, definitely not. And finally, like my husband just completely out of the blue one day, we're not even talking about this particular thing, just looked at me and he goes, you're going to do this, right? And I'm like, do what? And he like goes in, and I'm like, oh, I am. And he goes, I've known for 6 months. I wish you'd just realize it already.
wow. Wow. That's interesting to think about too, right? Going off car analogies, thinking about like who's on the journey with us. Who is speaking, and maybe they're talking over our GPS sometimes, right? And we can't hear, but being able, like, it's interesting to think that he recognized that like this was something that was in the future for you, and he was just kind of waiting. And then finally he was just like, listen, did you not hear that? Did you not hear the GPS saying that
Yeah, it was
this was
kind of like the brakes squeaking. And he's like, let me just see if she notices. And finally he's like, do you not hear that?
oh, that's true. Mm.
Or like the gas light, like he's just watching it go down. And finally he's like, hey, we got to get gas.
Wow. I could do car analogies all day with you, but
Yeah.
I think that the really cool thing about um, you know, being people that are building community, being people that are really looking for impacting other people, like it does tend to be a green light because it is who we are. The vehicle might look different, but the core of it is impacting people. It's connection with people. And I think that that's like one of the main things about even the first time that I met you, like the connection of we're here to have fun and like, enjoy the moments. And it goes back to also the way that we talk about building business, right? That's about sustainability. And I love that you mentioned easy and impactful were the words that you used. It's like the more that we can bring in like an easier yes, and knowing that it's in alignment, like how we impact, that's where the fun gets to be infused in the way that we show up to serve our communities and our people.
Yeah.
So I think
And
I
I
think
want
that
to
that's like
clarify on that because I've told people before, like it can be easy and impactful. And they're like, business can't be easy. I'm like, don't get me wrong. I'm like, business can be hard. I'm
right.
like, business can be easy. I'm like, but when the hard feels gritty and you feel like you're constantly pushing a boulder uphill and there's no relief from it, I'm like, that is a true indication from your inner GPS that you are on the wrong path. I'm like, I
Right.
have pushed multiple boulders up mountains and like just had it like roll back on top of me and then try again. And like when I say easy and impactful, it's because I finally figured out like this is what I love doing. This is where I make an impact. And yes, there are days I want to fire myself. And some days I do. And I'm like, you can be rehired in the morning, but today you're done. But like, there's not that grit or that like uncomfortability of like feeling like I'm going against the grain all the time.
Yeah, I love that you wanted to really touch on that more to talk about the fact that it's not all rainbows and sunshine. It really is that learning process. And again, it goes back to the 16 years, right? It goes back to being able to recognize that these things have transpired so that you can be the leader that you are today, because of this extraordinary journey that you've been on in the process of
Yep.
growing into the so do you call yourself a CEO, or what is your
I'm a
title?
fractional CFO is my title. So
Okay,
yeah.
cool. I love
So,
that.
and to
So
tie that kind of back to the choose on purpose piece, like I think as
yeah,
business owners and entrepreneurs, like we have to choose our community on purpose because there are people out there who will want to be in your community just to take, 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 take. And that is not
mm,
a bad thing if you're willing and okay with just give, 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 because there is that relationship that I think there are people in my world who I just give, 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 and I pour into them and I nurture that relationship and I mentor them. And I am okay with the fact that that will never be reciprocated from that person. But there are also people in my community that I'm like, they are my mentor. And I feel like I take, 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 and they pour, 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 pour. And I'm like, it's all full circle because they'll have somebody and they'll have somebody. But it's choosing that piece on purpose. Like I got really, really clear. Becky, you know my mom, and I hope she never listens to this podcast. I got really, really clear many, many years ago. I had to stop talking to my mom about my business when things were hard.
mm,
Because when things were hard and I would talk to my mom about it, she would go into mom worry mode and be like, you should just go get a job. You should like, I don't know why you work at this so hard. You should. And she would basically like crush my dreams very unintentionally. But
right.
I realized like she is not the person that when things are hard, she's not who I go to. So now I have other people that when things are hard, I go to and I can like vent and cry and have my moment. And they're like, great, that's amazing. How are you going to fix it? What's your next step? And I'm like, that's what we need. So it's choosing those people on purpose with intention of like,
Yeah.
you may have Jane over here in your community, and Jane may be the great person that's like your cheerleader, but she's not the person that you go to with problems. You may have Jill over here, and she's not a cheerleader, but when you have a problem, she's like, let's bust it out and figure out the solution. Like, so it's choosing those people on purpose, and that changes at each stage of your business as well. Like as you grow and you up level, those people have to up level with you.
That's so good. I'm so glad that you brought that up because, right, thinking about like that's a bold step to really and to own the confidence to know when to pause a relationship in a certain area of our life, right? And that's a really strong example of that because so many people can relate, and they aren't aware of it, or they just aren't willing to take the bold step to just own the awareness of it, to say, okay, this just needs to change the dynamic of this relationship so that your spirit can continue to be uplifted, and that you can have the reminders that there is there is certain times, certain spaces for certain energies of the people that we choose to keep in our life, that it resonates with them more, and it resonates with you more, and that alignment is so important, so that it's supporting both of your relationship dynamic. I
Yeah.
love
Well,
that.
and even with my husband, I've learned with my husband, like I go to my husband for everything, but there are times where I have to start the conversation with, babe, I just need to vent. I don't need you to fix anything. Just
Hmm.
listen. And there's other times that I go to him and I'm like, okay, I'm going to present a problem to you and I need you to tell me what I'm not seeing. Like, so I've got learned that with him, I have to be very specific of what I need from him. Otherwise, he just always tries to solve my problems. And I'm like, I don't need you to solve it. I know the solution. I just want to complain about it for a minute.
Yeah, such a great tip for those of you taking notes. That's such a great tip to really be clear in your communication with the people that you are choosing to have in your life for specific areas, right? Being able to have that communication and that understanding so that, you don't fraction the relationship, but there is clarity in how you can support each other and really seizing the opportunities so that, you can really be living in that intention, and they can also still be a part of it, but that fits for your relationship dynamic. I love that. I love that tip. That's awesome. So, Mandy, where can our viewers come in, hang out with you, connect with you, follow what you're up to, maybe check out those rest stops in the future that you have, and your green light moments that you're sharing? Where's the best place for them to connect?
Yeah, so you can always get me at my website, elevatingprofits.com. If you're looking for more of like my business conversations where I'm really intentional, I'm definitely that on LinkedIn, Mandy McGowan over there. Or you can always follow me on Facebook. I have a mix of like business and humor. My husband tells me I'm not funny. I think I'm hilarious. So you guys can be the judge. But I am always sharing motivational. So if you're looking for more of like a mix of getting like the whole picture of me, you'll definitely get that more on Facebook at Mandy McGowan.
Ooh, I love the dynamic of like, you want the mix, then come here. This is where I spill the tea, so to say.
Yeah,
So real. I love it. Well, this has been so great, Manny. I want to really honor the fact that you took the time to hang out. I know that Mandy's also going to be inside of the Work on Purpose with Purpose community, sharing in our growth workshop where she's going to come do a training. So I will definitely have the link below for that as well. That's happening December 28th of 2023. In case you're in the future, you missed it, don't worry, there is a recording of it. So we'll get you hooked up. But Mandy, I want to say thank you again for taking time to share those detours, those rest stops, and some of the green lights that you've had. That you're really choosing how you're living your life and living out that example in your communities. And I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
absolutely. Thanks for having me. I love the conversation.
Yay. Okay, great. Well, make sure that you guys subscribe. Let us know what you thought about the episode, and we look forward to seeing you next time.